Hello my friends, today we're making a vegetarian version of a family favorite of ours, which was rigatoni pasta with chicken sausage. But today we're mixing it up and we're going to be using a plant-based sausage from Beyond Meat. So our ingredients are chopped up red onions. They're both beautiful and I find them more flavorful than traditional white onions. Chopped up green capsicum or sweet pepper, chopped red capsicum. So you've got them here. We don't need very much of them. Of course, our sausage chopped into kind of bite-sized pieces, as you can see. We're going to use some cremini mushrooms in there. So a lot of flavor coming in from the mushrooms, some sliced garlic, and basically it's a very simple and quick ingredient list that you and your family can enjoy in no time. Now, there is some challenge in using meat substitute, in that they're very low on fat. So we're going to have to supplement it with some butter or oil to make up for the low fat content. And also, I do find they're not quite as flavorful as a traditional sausage. So we're going to be adding more spices to make up for it. All right, first things first, let's get the heat on the pan. Okay, so we have two pots here. One is to boil the pasta. So all I have in there is some hot, heavily salted water, right? The salt really is going to infuse flavor into the pasta while it cooks. So do not be concerned about adding too much salt. And here I'm using what's called a Dutch oven. I really do love these Dutch ovens. And if you don't have one, I strongly suggest you buy one. Now, the fancy brands like Le Creuset will cost you a couple $100 easy. Or you can just buy it from Amazon for about $40. In truth, the Amazon one's not quite as good, but the price difference is too big to resist. All right, when the pot's nice and warm, we're gonna have to put quite a bit of olive oil in, because as I mentioned, the Beyond Meat is low in fat. And in terms of order, you wanna cook the sausage first, get some nice browning on it, before you add the vegetables. The reason for that being that the vegetables are going to give off moisture, and if you remember from our other lessons, moisture kills flavor. It certainly is going to kill the browning on the sausage. Let's make sure that the sausage is nice and browned before we go adding our veg. All right, so the sausage is going to go in first. Just as a reminder, we're using Beyond Meat, so plant-based sausage. And I'm going to hold off on adding the garlic because it'll burn right now. It's fine to add it later when there's enough in the pan that will act as a way to diffuse the heat so that the garlic won't burn. Okay, so as you can see, the Beyond Meat sausage is beginning to brown, and as we predicted, it's giving off a fair bit of moisture. I so far haven't added any kind of flavorings to it. Now it's the time, now that they're about halfway done, to add some pepper and some salt. As you can see, our Beyond Meat sausage is beginning to brown. It's about halfway done. And as I had mentioned before, it does give off quite a bit of moisture, which is why we held off on adding any of our other ingredients, just so we don't end up boiling our meat. We want to really get a nice crisp on it, so we're going to let it fry. And we need to supplement the fact that it doesn't have as much flavor as traditional sausage by adding a little more pepper, fresh pepper as always, and salt than we typically would. So be generous with the salt. There we go. And I like to add a little paprika as well. In goes the paprika. It's going to give it beautiful color as well. And if we give it a nice little stir, okay, that's beginning to brown very nicely, so we're going to start adding our vegetables to it. I'm going to move the meat to the edges and make a nice little hot spot in the middle so that we can start frying our veg. In it all goes, so we had the sweet red peppers, the onion, the green pepper. Use some of those flavors from the sausage to coat our vegetable and infuse it with flavor. We're getting some nice aromas coming off now. And very shortly I can add the garlic. Isn't it beautiful and colorful? I really do believe we eat as much with our eyes as we do with our mouth. So it's got to look pretty.
Time for the garlic. If you see it, I didn't actually chop the garlic, I just sliced it quite finely, but not very finely. And that's on purpose. This is quite a rustic dish. And I don't want the garlic to burn. And also we're having everything be quite big and chunky. And on purpose, we're using a rigatoni pasta with it, which is a rather large pasta, so that it can hold all of these lovely vegetables and fruits within it. I like to use like the thinner pastas if I'm making a very soft sauce, like a marinara. And with a nice hearty sauce like this one, we're gonna go with rigatoni. Okay, so our garlic, our peppers, and our onion seem to have been searing nicely. It's time to add our mushrooms. We're expecting the mushrooms to give up a lot of moisture, so that's not our friend. That's why we're adding them a little bit later. I just diced them up, quite large pieces. As you'll recall from previous episodes, mushrooms really shrink a lot when they give off their moisture, so don't be alarmed by the fact that they're much bigger than everything else. Okay, now it's time to bring our pasta water to a boil. It's almost there, and then we're going to be adding our rigatoni. You have to cook these somewhat simultaneously because we're going to use the starchy water from the pasta to form the sauce for our pasta sauce. So everything is cooking quite nicely, but what you might notice is that we've run out of grease now, and that's the virtue of the fact that we are using plant-based sausage. So we're going to have to supplement it either with more olive oil or butter. I'm going to use butter because I plan on melting in some cheese into this, some delicious Parmesan and also some pecorino. And it just melts better with butter than it does with olive oil. But if you wanted to keep this a little more on the healthy side, you can use olive oil. You might have a harder time with getting the cheese to be incorporated into the sauce at that time. Okay, our water is nice and bubbling. I'm going to add the rigatoni to it. And we're going to undercook the rigatoni because we're going to finish it off in this pan with all the sauce. So if it recommends 11 minutes, which I believe this one does, maybe we'll take it off after 9 minutes or so and allow all the sauces to infuse into the pasta. I added some fennel seeds to it just for a little extra flavor and crunch. It's completely optional, to be honest. And traditional sausage already has fennel seeds in it, so you wouldn't need it, but the Beyond Meat one didn't. If you look at it now, we have this beautiful golden color, and there's lots of flavor now in it. What we're missing is a sauce. So we're going to be creating the sauce. And in order to do that, I'm going to use some of the super starchy water from the boiling water where the pasta is. And we're going to use that starchy water to start emulsifying with the cheeses that we're going to melt in it. So here I've got a ladle, and unfortunately you have to do this quite carefully, a little bit at a time. So 1 spoon of starchy water goes in. Okay, oh, and it starts to bubble immediately, and then we'll be grating the cheeses in. I'm going to use a combination of 24-month age Parmesan and some pecorino. I kind of insist on grating your Parmesan fresh. It's not because I'm a snob, it actually doesn't work if you buy pre-grated Parmesan, because they add additives to it so that the Parmesan in the jar doesn't all clump together. And by the virtue of that, it also won't form a sauce for you because it's designed not to clump. When we're making the sauce, we actually want it to bind with everything else. It's beginning to form a sauce, and you'll just have to keep grating some more and adding a little more of the pasta water. So that was the Parmesan. I'll give it another hit of Parmesan, and I'll start with the pecorino. Pecorino is a very salty Italian cheese, so you want to taste it before you add it, or else you might find that your pasta sauce will be excessively salty. Okay, I put the pasta off. It is by no means cooked yet. It is really quite al dente, but we're going to finish it off in the sauce. So what I'm going to do now is take another ladle of this very starchy pasta water, put it in the middle, and we're going to start melting our pecorino into it. Okay, I just grated in some pecorino. I'm going to repeat the process again with the Parmesan. You kind of have to do this little by little so you can judge how much moisture there is in it and whether you need some more of that pasta starchy water to go in. Okay, now traditionally you would strain your pasta before adding it, but I don't want to lose all of that yummy starchy water, so I'm just going to spoon it in, accepting the fact that some of the water is going to go in it. And that's by design, so that we're able to get a good emulsification of all that cheese and the water together. So I transferred the pasta to the pan. It's on a very, very low heat, and all I'm trying to do is get all the flavors to infuse now into the pasta. As you can see, it's actually incorporated quite nicely. I will be adding some more cheese to it, and more of the Parmesan, just because the pecorino can be really quite salty. My guess is, from a ratio perspective, I probably do 3 times Parmesan for 1 time pecorino. And if you're not a fan of pecorino, feel free to do all Parmesan. Well, there you have it, my friends. I plated it, I put a little bit of fresh basil on top and another shred of Parmesan, and it's ready to be enjoyed. I hope you and your family enjoy this recipe, that you will subscribe to my YouTube page and give me a like. Thank you for joining.